Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm really excited about today's guest. Her name is Joann Mester, and she empowers people to open profitable, sustainable brick and mortar businesses. In today's Amazon digital age, it's really interesting to hear her insights. She's got an amazing story. She's also the host of the Receipt Paper podcast, and I'm really excited about this conversation. So, Joann, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on today.
Yeah, I know we had connected through Podmatch, and I'm really curious to. I know you have a really interesting story to share. You know, you followed kind of the traditional narrative, which is kind of coming into question, and you started this business and this companies. And so, share with the audience.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So, was in the corporate world for 10 years. About 5 years ago, my soon-to-be husband and I were looking for other ways to bring in some additional income. And we started looking at franchises in the brick and mortar space and decided to go all in. And at first it was really just a way to bring in some additional income, but wound up taking a lot of time, but also being very lucrative, and found ourselves both leaving the corporate world and going all in the brick and mortar space. We wound up opening three CBD franchises. And then a few years later, opening a wellness center, and we bought stores, we sold stores, and it was a really, really awesome business. Loved it, brought us a lot of passion and excitement in our day-to-day lives. But in the beginning, it was definitely a whirlwind. We had no, even being a part of a franchise, we really didn't get a lot of the support that we were hoping for. And there was so much help out there in the digital world on, how to grow your business online, but not a lot in the brick and mortar space. So that's what kind of sparked our passion for wanting to get out there and help people in this space. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to be on the board of the franchise that we owned, and when during that, I saw a lot of people that were struggling were all making the same mistakes, and the people that were succeeding were all, doing the same things. So we were like, how do we just go out there and start showing people how to do this? So that's what sparked our company, Brick-and-Mortar, where we kind of help people build or grow their brick and mortar businesses. So
Yeah, really interesting story. And it sounds like, I've talked to a lot of franchise owners, people that are franchise coaches, help people. It's kind of a interesting, interesting side gig. Of course, it's, consult your professional, and, it's not without its risk. But what's interesting, in your first story, you talk about you and your husband landed this dream management gig, and then everything, you thought it was like this perfect thing, and then you kind of reached the top, and it was like life was not how it seemed.
yeah,
Elaborate.
well, totally. We were so excited to open this franchise, and we were like all in. Everything sounded perfect. It was a product we were passionate about, and just a really exciting, what sounded like a lucrative opportunity. But then as we started moving forward, it was like, okay, how do we do this? We set up our LLC incorrectly, and it took us months to do it. We couldn't find a location. It took us way longer than we anticipated. And then we opened, and it was like, where are the customers? So, every step of the way, it was like, okay, how are we going to make this work? We went all in, and there's no backing out on a 5-year lease that you commit to, right? So, yes, it was definitely very eye-opening in the beginning. Like, whoa, we need a lot more here than we.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So, we'll actually get into some of your other stories, but talk a little bit about just kind of because franchise, it's not like a blog or a podcast, or coaching. This is like franchises. You're actually like brick and mortar. It's like huge startup costs. Tell people that are considering that, what to be aware of.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things when, considering a brick and mortar business or a franchise is obviously mapping out what are all of those costs to get started, but also what are the costs going to be to maintain, for like that first year, right? Like it's not just going to be my doors are open and now all my expenses are paid for. A lot of people, some people that can happen and that's awesome, but you got to prepare for the potential of not making sales right away. And I think the other area that I really see the biggest mistakes and when people get started in brick and mortar business is just overextending themselves on those startup costs and spending way more than they need to. Our biggest saying that we say is start simple, get fancy later, because you don't need the fancy waterfall, you don't need this insane build out when you're starting in brick and mortar business. Like you're not going to get an ROI on that right away. And you can add things in as you go. Like in the beginning, we don't want to spend, $300,000 on a build out when it could be a $50,000 build out, right?
Yeah, I love that. And again, these are like this podcast is for people listening. Be sure to consult the experts. Don't get in over your head. The other question I have is, in this age of Amazon and work from home, is brick and mortar business dead? Is it right for people? What consideration?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of transitions in that space, but I most certainly don't think it's dead. I think that when we think about going into a brick and mortar business, it's no longer just to go buy a product, right? We can do that online. We can compare prices to things online. We can compare items, features. So, when I think about going to a brick and mortar business and what drives me there is typically the experience that business is going to provide. And I've really seen that the businesses that are succeeding are the ones that provide more of that experiential retail experience. You're walking in there to, see something, to try something, to taste something. You want to hear something or be entertained and delighted. So, having that experience that you can walk into and a reason to walk into the doors of that business has really been essential for what we can see.
The other question is, how do you, with what it sounds like is it's more competitive. The landscape is a lot more uncertain, and then you use experiences to actually kind of nail that retail business. How do what do you the most important things to look for when searching for a location? What are some important factors? Is it location? Suburban areas? Tell us more.
Location is one of the most important factors in a brick and mortar business's success. We see it time and time again, and I will work with people, and they're really struggling, and a lot of times it's simply because of their location. And sometimes we can get them to move to a better location, and they're 10 times more successful, or we just figure out ways to make it work at that location that they're at. But in the beginning, so many people, one of the biggest expenses is obviously your lease. And so many people want to cut down that cost. Like, how can I spend the lowest amount on that cost? But what they're doing is they're not realizing is that they're going to have to spend 5 times as much on marketing because that location is either harder to find or harder to see, or, if you think of your storefront as a giant billboard, how visible is your storefront? That's going to be pure marketing for you, and as far as where you're located. So, knowing that you have a good location will decrease your marketing expenses tenfold. I think one of the biggest things to look for is obviously visibility. How many people walk by, drive by, are seeing your business every day? Is your business easy to get to? Nobody wants to drive around 10 streets just to enter into your business and get to your location. But visibility is number one all day, and one of the biggest mistakes that we see people make all the time.
Yeah. The other question I had is, especially with competition, especially with online digital, but even like local competition, because like there was this popular bakery my wife and I love to go, and then kind of this big grocery chain store came in and took them out of business. So how can someone set their business up for success even if competition comes in?
I feel this one so much because we opened our first location and we were one of the first CBD stores in town. It was before CBD had boomed, and within a year we had 6 locations within a mile from us. So, we were so worried that, like, oh my gosh, there's no way. There's one literally across the street. And the biggest thing is knowing how to differentiate yourself there. So what we did, we went and looked at our competition, scoped them out. What are they doing? What are they not doing? Where's the gap there? What can we make sure that we offer that other people don't? And we wound up adding in some services that nobody else was doing. And ever since then, we've always been able to differentiate ourselves, and it's never really hurt us as more and more stores have come in, because people come to our business for something that they can't get anywhere else. So I think making sure that you're, keeping an eye out on that competition. What are they, where's their gaps? And then how can you differentiate yourself in a way, not just like, oh, better customer service or, the simple things, but in a big way. How do you differentiate your business so much that no other business can do the same thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard these stories where competing businesses, they'll put in fake, negative reviews, fake positive, and the internet, it's all people go, that's where they go to check things. So
Yeah. Don't recommend that. That's horrible.
yeah.
There's nothing worse than when you see that negative review pop up as a business owner. But I would recommend that you go look at those reviews. I think when you can go see what their negative reviews are, you can usually see, oh, wow, like they're not offering these products, or they're not nailing this service, and I can fill that gap as a competitor, right?
Yeah. What's the hardest part of being a brick and mortar business owner?
Oh, good question. Man, I think it's kind of evolved and changed throughout the years. I think in the beginning, the hardest part for us was navigating the traffic, right? Like, you don't really have a consistency in the beginning of knowing when people are going to come in or what time of day, and bad weather, less busy. So figuring out those ebbs and flows was really difficult, but after a while, you do find a rhythm to that. And once you start getting more traffic, it's not as concerning. But I think, today it just continues to be that challenge of, just staying up to speed with marketing and what's working and how to drive new business.
Yeah. The other question I had is in terms of, for someone interested in getting into it, what kind of margins can they expect? What kind of profit margins, and best advice for someone getting started. I'm curious.
Yeah. So the margins are such a wide range depending on the product, or if you're a service-based business. Obviously with service-based, more of your expenses are going to be up front with the cost of your equipment or things like that, or paying, a provider. But with product-based businesses, we see margins anywhere from 50 to 70%. Most people want to run at a 30% profit margin. So, the ones that we've seen successful are able to do that, including their overhead costs. So, yeah, I mean, you definitely just want to dig in on those margins. I've seen a lot of product-based companies that are not negotiating enough on the beginning on that wholesale costs, and they really should be pushing for a lot more. So there's always ways to further negotiate. If we're only getting like a 50% wholesale cost, push for more, push for, closer to 70, 80% for sure.
And what areas would you consider people look into when opening up a franchise?
Like what industries or what? Yeah. That's a good question. Not one I get asked a lot, but health and wellness is really hot right now. I think a lot of those franchises I see growing very rapidly. I would be weary of, jumping into any franchises that have only been around for a couple of years, and just kind of really further vet that out. we, obviously having been in a franchise, we're kind of, we advocate more for doing it on your own and not necessarily jumping into a franchise, but there are great franchises out there. And, if it's the right fit for you, then go for it.
And I know a lot of question for the listeners are thinking about, what is the cost and how do they get funding? What are options, all of that.
Funding is the biggest question we get, and there are so many ways to get funded. And, as you know, you've got grants and loans, and you can look for partners and investors. And, we've done all of that with our first business. We just simply saved up, cut out the unnecessary expenses, and we wound up opening our first business for less than $30,000, including the franchise fee. So it is doable if you really cut back. Our second business, we went and found a partner, and it was kind of a 50-50 split, somebody who also had a CBD store that we went in with. And then our third business, we went and we had an investor. He just wanted to fund it, and we just did all the work. And, later on down the road, we wound up selling that business and just split it. So there's lots of different scenarios like that you can look for. And then, obviously there's, we see people all the time that do seek out loans, and we have a lot of partnerships with people and help people do that. Because it is to get the funds that you need.
Yeah. And how can people, check out your website, social media channel, etc.?
Yeah. So if you go to Master Brick, that's N as in Nancy, you can find lots of resources on there. We've got a free brick-and-mortar business plan that can help you, kind of guide you through all those things that you need to know to get started in brick-and-mortar business. And if you already own a brick-and-mortar business, we've got a free resource on there, 75 ways to drive traffic to your business. So that's also a nifty one for you as well.
Yeah. And for all the audience out there, let's thank Joann for coming onto the show. Interesting to talk about brick and mortars. Of course, this is not advice. Do your own research.
Mm-hmm.
Startup costs, risk are extremely large. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.